So how's everyone this morning? That's good. They have coffee, so that's a start, I guess. As Mary pointed out, my name is Bezaire. I'm the Associate Director of Admissions for the Faculty of Engineering. I know you've seen some great presentations already this morning about engineering, about successful women in engineering, successful students in engineering. So we're going to steer clear a little bit about talking, or steer clear from talking about engineering and focus more on the admissions details, sort of what we look for when we're reviewing applications, things to think about, that type of thing. Now I know it's a little early still to be chatting with a lot of these concepts. If you have daughters who are in grade 8, grade 9, grade 10, well, yeah, I suppose it's early, but it's never a bad idea to start thinking of some of those details and getting some of the information up front. But I will keep it brief, and as Mary pointed out, we'll chat a little bit about co-op at the end, and then we'll have some time for a few questions as well before we move on with our day. So just to give you a quick idea, we're going to touch on me. I'll tell you a little bit about myself and why I'm speaking to you. We'll talk about admissions and just a few tips to keep in mind. Excuse me. Now, my first confession, I suppose, is that I am neither a woman or an engineer. So you're probably wondering, why on earth am I here? Well, to give you an idea, I am a physics graduate from the University of Waterloo. I graduated in 2005. And I'm a current post-degree student at the University of Waterloo, which basically means I'm free to take courses pretty much in whatever discipline I want. So I kind of pick and choose courses here and there while I'm working. And that's allowing me to hopefully work towards a master's program in English. So that's kind of my educational goals for now. I obviously, as a physics student, didn't have a whole lot of English background at the undergraduate level, so I can get some of that undergraduate background and work towards a master's. My current role at the University of Waterloo is twofold. First, on the admission side of things, I primarily guide students through the admissions process. I provide counsel on the process, on our programs, on career aspirations, all those types of things, all to help students gain admission to the University of Waterloo. We're looking at students from Ontario secondary schools from other provinces, international colleges, university transfer students, all kinds of different situations, and we're all trying to find the right fit for our program. On the recruitment side of things, I work alongside the marketing undergraduate recruitment coordinator for engineering. I help put together some of the brochures that are often delivered to your homes when students are requesting information about engineering. And I participate in events such as this one on campus. So I have a pretty solid background in a lot of these different activities on campus. Now, if it seems like I'm not working in my field, I'm not really. I've kind of left my physics behind. And as I'm sure you've heard, I mean, there's a lot of examples of individuals who start their career, academically speaking, in one area and end up somewhere else. I guess I'm a good example of that. I did study through the co-op program at the University of Waterloo, so I have a pretty good handle on how things work that way, structurally. And basically what I did when I was a student, through co-op, I gained all kinds of ideas, what my career options were. I didn't have a clue. Much like we're hearing today, students who are thinking, maybe I want to do engineering, maybe not. What can I do at the end of the day? Well, I was in the same boat. I didn't have a clue what was out there for physics grads. And I found some work at a really cool company in Waterloo. I went there for a few of my work terms. There's a company called NDI. They develop motion capture camera technology. So they develop cameras that you can use for motion capture in animation. You can use it in medical imaging systems in hospitals, a wide range of applications. A lot of engineers actually working with me. I kind of felt like an engineer some days doing some electrical work. But basically, I had that opportunity. I kind of felt things out and saw what was out there. When I graduated, I was finding myself in the same boat again. I was like, all right, now what? What do I do? And I ended up going back to that same company. I approached them and said, I've graduated, I'm looking for work. Can you help me out? And I was working the very next morning at 8:30 because I had that connection. They had paid to train me. They're like, sure, we need help. We're short-staffed. Come on over. So that's kind of how I started after I graduated, but it was all those extra activities that I got involved with as a student that brought me back to the University of Waterloo. I was a TA, I was a tutor, I was an orientation coordinator. I was really involved in the student life side of things. That got me into recruitment, which led me to the role that I have now. So ultimately, my job is not related to physics, but like engineering, physics it's all about problem solving at the end of the day. And not a day goes by in my job that I don't use the skills I learned in my degree. I'm not solving quantum mechanical problems anymore, and I'm pretty happy about that. But I still make use of all those tools, all those resources that I acquired throughout my degree. There's a lot more to a degree than just what you get in the classroom. And certainly that's important, but you learn a lot more as well. You learn a lot about yourself. You learn about your likes, your dislikes, and all those little things come back, as I'm sure many of you know, and I'm an example of that. Okay, enough about me. Talking about admission. First message that I want you to take away for your daughters and for your sons and for any of your children thinking engineering in the future, or even if they're not sure, keep up with those math and science courses for no other reason that they keep your doors open. They keep your options open. Okay? If students are thinking, they might be thinking about a career in medicine, science, engineering, of course, pharmacy, optometry, physiotherapy, all those professions, you need a background in math and science. So even at the early stages of high school, it's important to follow through and keep up with those math and science skills, keep up with those courses, and look ahead a little bit to what kind of courses you would need to become admissible to a lot of these programs. So keeping that in mind is certainly important. These are the 5 courses we're looking for admission to engineering now. Advanced functions, calculus and vectors, physics, chemistry, English. Those names may change in the next few years, so I mean, take that with a grain of salt, but the important part is we're looking for experience in calculus, a second math, sometimes it's been called historically linear algebra, discrete math, now it's advanced functions, but that second mathematics course is crucial, and physics and chemistry. Those are the core subjects that we need to see. We calculate an average of those, well, actually have 6 courses from high school, but we are going to include those 5 subjects, so they're pretty crucial to the admission decision, and the concepts that are learned in those courses are obviously pretty important to being successful in engineering down the road. Now, other things about admissions that we talked about, and I know Tricia mentioned a little bit about some of the other details that we consider. It's not just about marks. We do look at a lot more factors as well. The reason why is that engineering is extraordinarily competitive for admission. All over the world, really, but particularly at Waterloo. We're the most competitive engineering school for admission in the country. It's not necessarily easy to get in. Now, I'm not saying that to scare you off, but the reality is we have a lot of applications. So that means we have a lot of different factors to consider. We're going to have, at the end of the day, let's say we're admitting for one program down to around an 85. That's how many students we've had, that's how many spaces we have, and competition dictates that, you know, we can only go this low. But we might have 20 students with an 85.1% average, all looking for the same space. So how do you tell them apart? It's all these other factors that come into play. We really put a lot of stock in these other things. Volunteer experience, part-time jobs. If you have a full-time job while you're doing school, great. But involvements in school, student council, sports, any of the arts, all those things are important. We don't necessarily need you to be engineers already. I mean, there's a lot of great robotics clubs out there happening in schools, and a lot of students are taking advantage of that, and that's awesome because it's exposure to engineering principles. But not everyone has access to those things, so we don't need to see that. What we're generally looking for are examples of activities that show students taking initiative, so show time management, commitment, responsibility, working well with others. You know, all those general ideas. We're looking for general well-roundedness because that's important in Waterloo. Tricia was saying earlier, Waterloo is all about working as part of a team. Very team-building, team-oriented discipline. So all those types of skills are things that we're looking for. When I was coming into Waterloo, my big activity on the side was music. I was really heavily involved with piano. I took it really far. I played for a number of years. And for anyone who's been involved in music, it's a big commitment, and you know that. So that was, for me, that was an example of my committing my time to this as well as having a part-time job and still managing to pull off pretty good grades in my courses. Okay? So that shows us a well-rounded student who can obviously handle the rigors of an engineering degree. They've got the academic side, they've got the other side as well. Okay. Now, a few things to keep in mind beyond the admission side of things. We've heard all about how, you know, a lot of students don't know much about engineering, don't know what it is. You know, engineer stuff. Great. What does that mean? How do they find out sooner? Well, these are certainly ways. The fact that your children are here today is a great first step. But there's lots of enrichment programs, opportunities for students to get involved in engineering concepts at a very young age. Shad Valley is a great example. It's a high school enrichment program. It's a month long, happens in July every year. University of Waterloo is one of 12 universities in Canada, I believe, that hosts Shad Valley, Enrichment. And it's just an opportunity for students to come. They do workshops, they do activities, all these kind of different group projects, I suppose, that introduce them to science, technology, entrepreneurship, engineering principles. Okay, so they're kind of getting a head start, getting an idea of what engineering is all about at a very young age. Waterloo Unlimited, is the same sort of idea, but it's a week-long enrichment program. They have it for grade 10, 11, and 12 students. They have a different week for each of those groups of students. But again, it's transdisciplinary. So it's bringing together lots of different elements, exposing students to those elements and how we bring them together in an environment such as, say, engineering. How do we look at things from a different perspective? How do we solve, the water resources, all these various crises that are affecting us from an environmental perspective? How do we approach these and look at them from different perspectives? I mentioned robotics competitions earlier. FIRST is a great example. It's an organization that has a lot of different contests, competitions, activities for children of all ages, literally. Starting from age 8, they can get involved in their first robotics contest. It's the first Lego League, but it's just what it sounds. They're basically developing solutions, they're building machines that will accomplish particular tasks out of Lego. And that grows into higher and higher divisions of robotics contests. Very much like you've probably seen on TV with Robot Wars on the Discovery Channel, that kind of show. Very much the same idea, but they're really getting that group activity, getting involved in robotics, getting a feel for what engineering is all about at a young age. Now, the last thing I want to add, and we heard a little bit about this as well, the issue of self-selection with students, females in particular, who are not applying to engineering programs unless they're clearly above and beyond our requirements. And we've seen this for many years. Basically, if we told a female that, typically we're admitting around an 85 average this year, they would, they'd think they need a 90% to get in. And it's just not the case. There's no discrimination that way. But I think it's a matter of confidence that they believe in a male-dominated profession that they need to be that much stronger to even be considered. So they're not applying in the first place. And as we heard, it basically results in we have very few female students who are applying with grades, less than 85%, in that sort of borderline range. They're all very strong students. My wife has a good explanation for that. She just says that girls are a lot smarter, which someday she may be right. But at the end of the day, it's because of that confidence, and we're not seeing those applications. There are a lot of girls who are just sort of going by the wayside and deciding, not quite sure that I have the marks, so I'm not going to apply. Well, if you don't apply, there's a 100% guarantee that you will not be admitted. So give yourself that opportunity. Let your children know that they need to give themselves that chance. They're being treated just like any other applicant. They have the same opportunity to gain admission, and they should really take advantage of that. In fact, I've seen a number of male students. Just this past year, we had one student, I had a long conversation with him. He was trying to convince me that he was a strong candidate for admission. He did not have any of our required courses, and he had a 59.7% average. So, the females are not applying unless they have an 85, and the guys are on the totally opposite end of the spectrum. They have no fear, no shame maybe, in applying. So let them know that they have that opportunity. They just have to take the chance, really, and submit that application. Did he get admission? I'm sorry? Did he get admission? Ultimately, no. He did not, unfortunately. The big messages I want you to take away today are that it's important for students to keep their options open. They can do that in lots of different ways, whether it's keeping their options open by taking the right courses and keeping their actual academic path available to them, whether it's getting exposure in those enrichment programs or different activities, or just keeping up with whatever it is they do in their spare time. If it's playing sports, we love to see that on the side as well. It shows that a student can be well-rounded. So keeping up with all those activities are really important. And as well, keeping in touch and getting the current information. As we pointed out, a lot of the information is likely to change. Our policies, procedures, even courses that are available in high school, it's very possible that those will change in a few years' time. And it's very easy in the world of admissions at any university for myths to get perpetuated. Oh, this university said this about you, so clearly you're terrible at what you do, and all these things. Get your information, get your facts right from the source. Okay, so don't hesitate to drop us a line, visit us in these various events, and ask the questions that are important to you to get the facts. And I'm a good place to start. If you have some questions about engineering, if your daughters have questions in the future about engineering admissions, or just engineering in general, I'd be happy to speak with them, and feel free to write my contact information down and pass that along. Now, there were a few questions about co-op and the co-op program. And as I pointed out, I was a student in physics in co-op. So I have a pretty good handle on how things work. And the co-op system, I think the most important thing to know is that it is not a job placement system in any way, shape, or form. It's very different from co-op that you'll see in a high school environment. It is a competitive job market for graduates, and it's the same story for co-op students. What we have essentially, what we provide students with is, first and foremost, a database of job opportunities. We have 130 staff members working in the Cooperative Education and Career Services Department, and they're all there to make connections, maintain relationships with employers, and to help students through this process. Okay? So those 130 staff, over the years, over 52 years, since day one, we've had co-op. Over those 52 years, they have built up all these relationships, and we have thousands and thousands of jobs available, many for engineering, because the University of Waterloo is founded as an engineering co-op school. That's all we have. So that's where the oldest connections are. But those staff members are there to help provide those job opportunities. The students can then apply to whatever jobs interest them. Now, obviously, the whole point of co-op is to get relevant experience in your field. That's what you're looking for. But it hasn't stopped students in the past from applying to jobs outside of their field that they've just had a particular interest in, and that's fine. But at the end of the day, they're applying to whatever jobs interest them, and it is a competitive process, as I said. So there will be interviews, there will be selection, there will be many students vying for the same job, and that's just the reality of it. But all the interviews will happen on campus. And students will essentially, if they go through, let's say they have a number of job interviews. They've applied for 30 jobs. They maybe had 10 interviews and they have 3 job offers. Well, of those 3 job offers, they'll be able to rank those. They'll just say, this is my favorite job. I want this one first, second choice, third choice. The employers, of course, obviously have a say as well. So they'll have interviewed lots of students and they'll be ranking their first choice, second choice, third choice, 25th choice, whatever the case may be. And there's ultimately a matching process to try and keep the employer happy and keep the students happy. And we match up as many people as we can to get as many people hopefully satisfied with their job opportunities as they can. The employment rate every year is around 98%. It's a little tougher in reality to get that first work term because students in engineering are getting a job in their very first year. They don't necessarily have a lot of experience. So we do encourage students to make use of any connections they may have through home, through either yourselves or through family and friends, where they might be able to get that first job secured right away, at least as a backup plan. Okay? And then they get that first job. That's their first bit of experience that's going to help them to find all those other job opportunities. The Co-op Department, Career Services, is also there to help students. I mean, they're going to help you through the process in terms of preparing them for interviews, helping them get their interview skills nicely honed, help them develop their resume so it's nice and professional looking. Like they're there, they have professionals there to assist them and to guide them. It is ultimately the responsibility of the students to take that first step, submit those job application packages, and take that initiative. And unfortunately, we do hear stories every year where, you know, I mentioned that we have a 98% job employment rate. There's always 2% or so that don't find jobs. And in many cases, the students that I meet with tell me that, you know, oh, I was expecting this job and I wasn't prepared for the interview and whatnot. And they're basically expecting a job on a silver platter. And it doesn't work that way. These employers are making an investment. So the students do have to take the time, put the time in and the effort in to get the gain. But for those students who are making use of all those resources and taking it seriously, it's working very well for them. And over the course of the degree, students will have, in engineering, will have 6 different work terms. 6 different work terms of 4 months each. That's 24 months, 2 full years of job experience by the time they graduate. That's a pretty good way to get a head start when you're looking for a career when you're done. So it's definitely a huge advantage. And of course, it's paid opportunities as well. In engineering, we tend to have among the higher employment salaries in co-op. And over the course of the degree, students can earn, on average, between $55,000 and $75,000 through their co-op jobs. So that's money that's certainly it's going to help pay for them to live, but it's going to be money that's going towards their education, towards their tuition fees as well. So it's a pretty huge asset. For myself, I went through co-op, and when I graduated, I had no debt. I pretty much put myself through school, and I had no debt because of the money I was able to earn on co-op. So that's not necessarily the case for everyone. I mean, it might be unrealistic to say everyone's going to have tons and tons of money, and well, it doesn't happen. Education's expensive, unfortunately, but it definitely puts a big dent in the bills that you'll have to pay. Okay. Are there any other questions? Yes? Great question. Is it still a requirement to complete a work term report? Yes, it is. At the end of the day, there are 6 work terms. Students need to successfully complete 5 of them to meet their graduation requirements. And part of the package of successfully completing a work term is submitting a strong work report and having it evaluated and getting a grade of pass, basically. So yes, it is required. Yes? Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, just a question in high schools locally.
Mm-hmm.
Is it still practice to sort of readjust averages depending on the high school? What are your thoughts in terms of good schools and not so good high schools?
Great question. For those who can hear, the question was related to the history of essentially ranking high schools. Do we do that? Technically, no. We don't rank high schools. We don't say this high school is number 1, this high school is number 2, so we want all the high schools from number 1. It doesn't work that way. But we do keep track of how students do from various high schools across Ontario. So essentially, we take a look at what their admission average was, and then we take a look at those students again after first year. And that gives us an idea of, did their marks drop by 10%, by 5%? And realistically, there are some schools that have historically shown that they're preparing students better. And they're more successful when they arrive. So yes, in reflection of that, we do have some minor adjustments. It usually amounts to no more than 5% on the overall average. 95% of all schools fall within that same 5% range. So the differences are pretty minor. There's actually more of an impact coming from that personal profile where we look for all the extracurricular activities. But it is there, and it is to reflect the fact that some schools, the preparation is better, and we want to essentially balance the playing field. If 2 students have an 85, but we know that this school has always been really, really, really strong, well, we will acknowledge that way. Yes?
I think it's a related question, but my son's in the International Baccalaureate program.
Mm-hmm.
I was just wondering, with that program, is there any consideration in terms of averages? A lot of the students are wanting to drop out of the program to go back into normal academic to boost their grades because the perception is they have less demand homework-wise, and there's external adjudication of the marking. So I'm just wondering, is there any consideration around admissions for people graduating from those programs?
So is there any consideration for students graduating from I guess enriched programs like International Baccalaureate, IB, or AP programs? Yes and no. There's not a direct impact because at the end of the day, what the schools, to my understanding, what schools do in Ontario when they're IB schools, they are evaluating students on the IB scale, which is a 7-point scale, and then those grades are converted into a percentage, and those percentage grades are what we see at the university, and it's also what goes on their Ontario transcript. It is our belief that the conversion from a 7-point scale to a percentage scale is done favorably. Like that conversion is outlined by the IBO, by the International Baccalaureate Organization. And they basically said this is what a 7 really equates to. So we have to essentially accept that as what it is and accept that what they're telling us is the truth. So the grades that we see reported from schools, they are converted through this way, and the assumption is that they're converted in a way that is favorable. So it may have already been taken into account, effectively, the fact that it is a stronger program. But ultimately, we are forced to use the grades that are reported to us. So that's what we're seeing. Whatever comes from the school, that is what we will use. Now, having enrichment opportunities like IB on your record will help you indirectly, because that's one of those things that we like to see in those extracurriculars. It's essentially a check mark. You can say, oh, this student has done extra work. They're clearly going to be more prepared, so that strengthens that profile for them. But directly, there's no immediate impact. Yes, in the back. Good question. If you want to become involved with Shad Valley or Waterloo Unlimited or FIRST, how to do so. They all have websites, and unfortunately I don't have them on my slideshow here. But we also have representatives, I believe, today from Waterloo Unlimited.
Yep. FIRST Robotics.
and from First Robotics. Shad Valley, if you simply type in Shad Valley on Google, it will be the very first thing that comes up. They're very well known. They've been established for a number of years, so it's pretty easy to find the information that you need for Shad Valley.
And I might just mention, we're starting, I guess last year we're starting some of the first Lego Leagues in the elementary schools. So last year we partnered with 3 elementary schools to provide mentors and things like that. This year we have 8 elementary schools. So I'm one of the mentors for one of the schools and some other students and things like that. So if you're interested in getting, you know, like elementary schools or even high schools and then robotics, the first robotics, let me know or contact me, and then we can sort of put that school on the radar, because there you find a teacher that is committed to doing it in the school system.
Do we have some time for a few more?
Yeah, we've got a couple more.
Sure.
We've got a few more minutes.
Okay, sure.
It's maybe a dirty word.
Uh-oh.
Words, but affirmative action or equity for admissions.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything that is being done to sort of try and bring up the number of young people in engineering?
Not from an admissions perspective. We treat every applicant, whether it's an international applicant or a Canadian applicant or a male or a female, they're treated based on their merit. Yes?
My son has finished high school. You know, it's outside here. I mean, as an older person, so I was like the lady this morning was talking about, or someone like me that wants a second career. How do you go about this?
So if you're essentially applying as a mature applicant, and what would the process be? In most cases, students who have been away from school for a number of years, regardless of their background, we usually like to see them go back and repeat the high school requirements. It can be done in many different ways. It doesn't have to be done in a day school. It can be done through, there's a lot of online programs. There's a particular center called the Independent Learning Center, ILC. It is, if you like the website, it's simply ilc.org. But they are ministry funded and ministry run. So their courses are entirely legitimate, and they are essentially following the Ontario curriculum. So students can complete any of the requisite courses online through this organization. But we would look for those same course requirements, because it's, even for students who have been around the block, they've been to a university, they've got a degree, but it's been 10, 15 years, it's usually important to refresh that material to give yourself a fresh start in a university engineering program. So, yes? In the
What's the trend for the cutoff percentage? Is it graph every year? Is it going up, down, fluctuating?
What are the trends with cutoff percentages? They've been holding pretty steady for the past few years at least. Because we are competitive for admission, we have many more applicants than we have available spaces. Essentially what happens is every program, all of our 13 programs have their own applicant pool. So each program could potentially differ substantially. We have some competitive programs like mechatronics and nanotechnology engineering. They're newer fields, so they garner a lot of excitement, which results in higher averages, around high 80s to be competitive for admission. But some of our more established programs that have been around for a long time, if you think geological, civil engineering, they're going to be in the lower, maybe mid 80s for admission, but it does vary year by year. But as I said, in the past few years, things have held pretty steady. Most of our programs, if students are in the mid 80s, around an 85, in that sort of ballpark, they're going to be a competitive candidate. Some programs might have more luck than others, but they're certainly going to be in the thick of things, with that range. Yes?
Two questions. First one is, do you consider the order in which University of Waterloo is placed on the application from the student when you consider admitting them or not? And second of all, do you consider the fact that one of their parents is an alumni when you look at admissions?
Good question. Or questions, rather. Your first question, we do not put any emphasis whatsoever on whether a student has chosen us as their first choice or their 20th choice. It doesn't make a difference. We review all the applications equitably that way. As to your second question, do we consider that an applicant, their parent may be an alumnus? Yes, we do. I mean, it's the same kind of thing where there's no direct impact. We're not going to say, oh, we must take this student, we must boost their average 5%, because that would be pretty unfair. But it would be sort of an extra check mark, something that goes into that profile that we would consider along with the whole package, so to speak.
Okay, maybe one last question, then we'll have to.
Sure.
In our high school,
Interesting.
It's been a lot more difficult with my younger children. I'm wondering if there's any consideration to that with respect to potential departments and board with
Okay, that's a bit of a unique situation. If we didn't know about it, we wouldn't do anything about it because all we're going to see is a reported math grade. But that's a pretty unique circumstance where if it was explained to us, we'd have to give that some special circumstance or some special consideration, rather, because it's a bit of an unusual circumstance. And we would essentially, if we saw that note, if either through a letter or as part of the profile, we would do some investigating. We'd contact the school and try and learn a little more. And if we felt that that was generating a significant impact, then yes, we would make some allowances for that. There's no real standard. Like we can't say plus 5%, plus 3%. We just kind of look at every case on an individual basis. But we would certainly take a closer look.
Okay, thank you very much, Phil.
Thank you.